Welcome back, everyone. And as you already know, we have another episode of The Overthinkers, but a special segment. As you know, we were recently doing interviews with different talents in Toronto. And today we have a very special guest. His name is Brendan Bawn, and he is a financial guru. Sorry?
I said hello.
Oh, sorry. I thought I said your name wrong.
No.
And he's a financial guru. He's very knowledgeable about everything pertaining to your finances, what to invest in, what to look at, housing markets and everything. And today he's going to be talking with us about various things. So Brandon, thank you for coming in.
Oh, thank you for having me.
No, thank you. I hope the drive wasn't too
hour and a half. Wasn't too bad.
In a 300S?
Yeah, oh yeah, still.
You mean 20 minutes? Well, anyway, so let's get into it, Brandon, because it's a Sunday. Everybody wants to relax on a Sunday.
Absolutely.
So can you tell us a little bit about yourself? Just like a small introduction and what you specialize in?
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously we went over my name's Brendan. We'll start there. I've been a financial advisor for just coming up on 4 years now.
Okay.
I kind of went into it straight out of university. I did a bachelor's degree in marketing. I even specialized in business in high school. I've been investing myself since high school. Since I was about 17, I opened my own TFSA and started investing in stocks and things like that, saving up to pay for university, and then eventually, using that to pay for a house.
Oh wow!
So that's kind of like my background on how I was always into finance, and then eventually the opportunity came up to become an advisor. I didn't even really know it was a thing. I knew it was a thing at banks, but I didn't know it was a thing in the way I do the job. And honestly, I'm just loving it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's kind of there's a drift between it because a lot of people who do finances don't really like the dealing with the numbers in itself. They just like the outcome of what you can get from it. But it's interesting to see somebody who really delve deep into the finances. So what sparked your interest in finance?
That's a great question. I don't really know what sparked it in terms of getting into it in general. I always was into business, and in high school, you kind of get the opportunity to take business courses, take accounting. I went to York Memorial, the high school,
right.
And they had some business classes there, and I just really loved it. And then from there, I took every business course I could, and also some of my mentors at that time were salesmen, worked in sales, worked in business in general. So I always wanted to be in that kind of field. And then again, that kind of shaped my way of what I chose to take in high school, where I chose to go to university, and then eventually leading into what I do now.
Right. Which is
financial advisor.
Right, exactly. Of course, which is sorry, do you refer to be called as consultant, advisor, or
I'd say financial advisor. The terms kind of change all the time. There's different designations in my field. So for example, I have to do, let's say, a 1.5, 2 year course to be called a certified financial planner, right? And that's kind of the next step in my career for me, getting more education, improving my designations, making sure I'm always learning for the clients, but also just making sure I'm in a better position, kind of increasing my standing in the industry.
Right.
But I would say financial advisor, yeah.
Which is always good. The more you're known, the more business you can bring in and the more profitable it is for you.
Absolutely.
Right.
And, I really believe that if you can give the best advice, you'll continue to get clients.
Right.
If you're always doing the best thing, people will continue to refer people to you.
Right. And I find for myself, as somebody who I don't really have the best knowledge when it comes to my own finances, and I find it hard to trust certain people with my finances. And to build that trust, how do you usually build that trust with your clients, like to enable them? You don't have to give us everything, just like a sneak peek.
The first thing is just to learn about them as a person, because at the end of the day, it's kind of ironic as a financial advisor to say this, but money is not the most important thing in the world. It's just not.
Right.
My job is kind of to find out what is most important in the world to you and how does money pertain to that. The most important thing to you is buying a house. Then, okay, obviously money pertains to that. If you want to retire or you want to take care of your daughter or your mom or your grandma or whoever, there's a money aspect to it. But the real important thing is the human aspect. So I'm trying to learn what you actually want to do, right? And then kind of bridging the gap between where you are financially, if it involves finances, which it usually does,
right,
and then where you need to get.
Right. That's a very good point because, as I said, not a lot of people have that knowledge within finances. Yeah. So a lot of people are very illiterate when it comes to their finances. So,
Absolutely.
could you explain how one would go about getting better financial literacy? So as you said, like you're an advisor, so you go talk to different people, you educate them on the certain things you could do with your finances. How did you start off to get your financial outside of school?
No.
Did you read books or anything like that? Could you share with us?
I would say I read some books. Honestly, the titles elude me. I'm reading kind of all the time, articles. That I'm just kind of always reading. But books included in that. Social media is a big one now. You can learn a lot from social media, but also like being careful to kind of do more research, because what a lot of people put on social media is not entirely accurate. Most people wouldn't know when they're watching it, but once you're kind of industry and you're in the industry and you can go, oh, like that's not entirely right. But kind of taking what fits to you. But yeah, it was just definitely a lot of reading, and then also kind of trial of error. So when I started doing my own stocks, my own portfolio, that's when you really, really start to learn, because you're dealing with your own money and you kind of learn the emotional side of it. Right. There's more to it. Even when you're dealing with your own money, you can get very emotional. Right. And it's hard to kind of learn to kick that habit. So definitely you kind of learn by fire almost.
Right. Trial and error, as you said. Yeah,
absolutely.
I'd imagine when you're dealing with your own finances, you're a bit more nitpicky with certain things that you want to invest in, or certain things you want to spend money on, or if you want to save it all, right?
Oh, absolutely.
So yeah,
I'm cheap as hell.
Don't worry, me too. If I could save money on something, I'll absolutely do it.
Yeah,
I think that's the same basis for everybody, right? Nobody wants to spend excess money. Yeah. We all want to gain money. So
you hope so. I don't know. I've met some interesting characters where they want to save money, but then they tell me about their finances, and I go, we should change some things, right?
Right.
But and talking to experts is important,
right?
To learn more. There's always someone that knows more than you, myself included. Even I'm a financial advisor. There's people that know more than me. So just always being open to learning. And at the end of the day, I would say it takes time too, right? People are very, very busy, right? They work their job. Like for you, you said you're a mechanic, right? You might be working 8-hour days or 10-hour days. It's hard to learn about finance in your off time when you're exhausted.
Right, exactly.
Right. And that's why I have a job. Right.
Yeah, exactly. And then I think that's a really good benefit. So do you mostly deal with people in Toronto, or are you branching out to the GTA or anything of that sort?
I'm definitely branching out. So I obviously lived in Toronto. I moved out of Toronto about a year and a half, coming up on 2 years now.
Okay.
Just because I bought a house in Aurelia. Obviously, it's incredibly hard to buy a house in Toronto, especially at our age.
Absolutely
right?
insane.
So I'm kind of starting to move my practice between Toronto, Vaughan, and then Barrie, Aurelia area. Aurelia is where I live. So kind of taking care of everyone within that, let's say, hour and a half drive.
Okay. Wow, that's a very long drive. I remember I had to go do my G test in Aurelia, and also annoying as fuck.
Yeah, I don't know. You know what? I love driving. Right? I would say I just love it. I would say it's not too far. It's about an hour. Mm-hmm. Some people would say, that's really far. But the way I look at it, I used to, my mom and dad are split. So my mom used to live at Weston and Finch. My dad used to live at Jane and Lawrence. That would take me an hour. Right. At certain times of the day. So I'm like, it takes me the same amount of time, even just going from Toronto to Toronto. Right. So I don't know. The driving doesn't bother me as long as I'm moving and not, stuck in lights and stuck in traffic.
It's the most annoying. I mean, that's the thing that you have to get used to when you're in Toronto, right? Having to deal with constant traffic, stuck in like stop and go traffic. I have big road rage. So to deal with that is just absolutely blows a fuse in my head.
It's terrible. That's you know what? I love Aurelia. There's no traffic. It's great. You can get everywhere, within 10 minutes. But like with that being said, there's certain things that you can only get in Toronto too.
Right.
Right. And I'm in Toronto all the time.
Exactly. Right. And so since we're talking about how you go around to different clients to talk about their business, right? So I can only assume that you have a really good grasp on the financial situation or the economic situation that Canada, specifically Toronto, is dealing with, right? Mm-hmm. So what do you think about how the world is going, where the cost of living has increased, right? Yeah. We have the gas prices are all time high. Even to go to grocery stores, we have to, we're spending more out of the pocket just for simple items. So what do you think the state of our economy is?
You know what? I would say it's starting to get better. Obviously, we had really rough times during COVID. I'm not sure how familiar you are with the stock market, but during COVID, it crashed.
Everything crashed.
And of course it did, right? Stores were closing. Right. The economy was basically shut down. So the cost of that was, as a government, you had to make sure people had money to pay their bills, which was essentially all the COVID stimulus. And, that was great for certain people and not for others. But the cost of that, and nothing's free in life, is you're printing all this money, which contributes very heavily to inflation.
Right.
It's just like a stat in the States. They printed more money in 1 year than they had in the whole history of the United States.
Right.
And Canada did, similar things. So that just really increased inflation a lot. And it's starting to come back down slowly. So it will get better, and it is getting better, but it takes a lot of time.
Right.
It takes time. It takes patience. And it's hard for people, right? Where they have to kind of slim down, buy different foods. In some cases, it's good, helping people kind of pay a lot more attention to their finances.
Right.
But then, of course, there are the people that it's hard for them to get around it.
Pretty much, yeah. And so you said the economy is getting better, right? And then we look across the world, we see a lot of people struggling with the same amount of issues, right?
Absolutely.
So do you believe, based on the wisdom that you have pertaining to finances and the economy, do you believe we're heading into a recession?
It's hard to say. It's really hard to say. So at the beginning of this year, there were talks that we were going to hit a recession and my company and who I work with, we do a lot of classes and attend a lot of sessions of economists, lead investors for big funds of money, and they all essentially had the same idea that we are going into a recession, but that it was going to be not a huge one. It wasn't going to be long lasting, but the statistics are starting to come out now that it's actually it's getting better before we even hit that point of a bad recession, which is great. Now it's hard to say if that's going to continue. But my hope is that it will. And in the long term, you have to kind of look at everything from a long-term basis. If Canada survives, or US survives, or Europe survives, which it should, right?
Right.
In the long term, you'll be fine, right? But it is hard not to worry, right? With all the things going on in, let's say, Ukraine, that's essentially the biggest thing going on right now. Ukraine, Russia, China, and geopolitical tensions.
Yeah.
That's what's causing a lot of what's happening in the world, on top of already inflation from COVID, right?
Because they say that within 5 years, that whole enterprise, the dollar value is going to be worth more than the US dollar value.
Yeah.
So could you explain to us just a little bit about that whole sequence and how it works?
Yeah. So that's hard. It's very hard to predict, right? Essentially what happened is a majority of the world is using US currency, right? To do all their trades, to buy all their goods. There's benefits to that in that, with the world using essentially one currency for worldwide trade, it's more stable. Right. And that's great for prices worldwide when you're doing trade. But the thing is now, China, Russia, India, Brazil, there are some other countries I'm probably forgetting in there, but those are the main ones. They're starting to use their own currencies, and they're even talking about making their own currency. Right. To do trade amongst themselves. So it's kind of hard to say how that will affect the worldwide economy. But what it does do is give those countries, economic strength in a time where maybe that's not a good thing when there's a bunch of war going on.
Exactly.
Right. And it's, everyone has their own opinion on should the US be getting involved in all these things, or should Canada? And it's hard to say. It is. But at the same time, it's kind of hard to leave other countries up to dry. Although, it's, again, they do it for some countries and not others. We've done it
in the past.
Exactly.
Whatever fits the political agenda when it comes to who we support and who we don't support.
Exactly. And sometimes it's a very a gray area that, let's be honest, no one really knows what's going on except the people that are in that room.
Exactly.
Right. So it can get there's probably some pretty dark stuff that is even beyond me.
Yeah, I agree. When it comes to political finance or political economy or things like that, when you're dealing with that, it's always a big mashup. But that's not what we're here for. No. We're here to talk about the finances in Toronto. We're here to talk about the economy in Toronto. We're here to talk about you who specialize in all that. So I just want to, what is one of the best pieces of financial advice that you could give to someone who has very little knowledge, or let's say the 5 best tips that you can give?
The 5 best. Oh, it's tough. So the first thing I would say for anyone before I give any tips is that every single person is different. So, you have to know yourself individually, what you actually want. So the first thing I would say is, have your goals outlined, whatever it is, maybe short term in a year, short term in the next 3 to 5, and then long term, 10 plus. Right. Because if you don't have your goals, and I don't mean just in your head, written down on paper, being very specific. For example, a lot of people our age, it's I want to buy a house. I want to buy a house in 5 years. Well, what kind of house do you want? Do you want a condo? Do you want a detached? Where do you want to live? Being very specific about your goals, because that tells you, okay, if my goal is a condo in, let's say, 5 years in Toronto, well, I know the price is going to be maybe 400,000 or 500,000. And then that tells me, okay, I need to maybe get 30, 40 grand under my belt to put down. And then you kind of have a starting point to say, okay, I'm going to save this much a month. I need to invest and get this kind of return. And then, you also have to think about things like a mortgage, right? And that's just one example.
Right.
But for anything you're thinking about, there has to be a very specific goal, because then everything you do can be around that. Whereas if you don't have any goals, you're just kind of flying in the wind, right? And it's great to save money. Everyone should save money. That's probably a good tip, and invest, but you should always have a goal to go along with it. What other tips would I have? I mean, do be careful about what you spend. I would say everyone should have a budget. Most people I meet with don't, whether they're kind of just starting out, just coming out of school. And, I've met with very successful business owners that are worth millions of dollars and own multiple companies, and they don't have a personal budget, right? And they make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, sometimes millions, and they spend it all, right? Mm-hmm. And then, obviously they're still in a good position to retire, those individuals, but you still have to think about, well, how much am I making? How much am I spending? Where can I become more efficient?
Right.
Efficiency is a big thing when you're talking about personal finance, right? Because you want to make sure that you're using every dollar you have as good as you possibly can. Being very conscious about it. Just as I would say, a lot of times I'm cheap, maybe too much, but I'm trying to be very conscious about everything I do. And there's some things, I would say I waste money on, but still always trying to keep in the back of my head, okay, I know I have this much, or I'm already putting this much away every single month. And then I would say speak to a professional. That's a very important thing. Just like if I'm getting my car fixed, right? I'm going to go to a mechanic, right? I'm going to go to you to get my car fixed because, I'm not the best at that.
Right.
It'll take me too much time. I might mess it up. If you go to a financial advisor, and it might not cost you anything, where you could just kind of pick up some knowledge and learn.
Right.
Which is important. The number one job I have is just to educate my clients.
Just to educate.
Right. And then, helping them carry out whatever goal it is from there.
Which is very honorable, because honestly, I struggle. I'll speak personally, I struggle so much with finance, right? Because honestly, I don't have the right direction to go in. And a lot of people within my age group, right? We can say 18 to 29, for example.
How old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
I am 26.
26. You had to think about that.
I had to think about that. I'm like, wait, hold on. Wait. I have to base it off my sister's age, because my sister's 2 years older. So she's 20 and I'm 26. Crazy, right?
She's 20, you're 26?
She's 28.
28, okay.
Yeah, and I'm 26. So
going a little deaf.
Yeah, that's okay. We all are. So to go back now, so I was recently viewing your website, right? brendenbawnfinancial.com.
Yeah.
And you list various services that you have to offer for different individuals, right? So as I was looking, you have for individual and then you have business.
Absolutely.
So without, spilling a lot of your secrets, could you just give us the tip of the iceberg of what you have to offer within those specific categories?
Yeah. And it's a great question. Thanks for asking.
Of course.
So I would say, in those two categories, right, the reason they're separated is because they have different needs. And sometimes there's different products that are only available to businesses, right? And that's a big part of my practice and that I'm focusing more on now. And, honestly, starting to become an expert in that area. Not that you ever know everything. But on the individual side, I would say, general financial planning is a big place I start. Always starting with, what are your goals? Again, like I just mentioned, that's the starting point for everyone. Right. What my services are, once we figure out, okay, what are your goals, and doing a budget. So one, I know how much are you making, how much are you spending, what's left over. So I know what we have to work with. Then kind of figuring out what are your needs, right? So a lot of people might need to protect their income, and you have life insurance for that. You have critical illness coverage, disability coverage. The whole point is you have coverages to protect yourself financially. A big part of my job is essentially risk protection. Right? What risks do you have that could cause problems in your financial plan? So that's a big part of what I take care of, both on the individual and business side. So I would say those kind of insurances are a big part of it, but then also investing, mutual funds, segregated funds. Those are what I'm licensed to, talk about and recommend and help people set up, along with some other investments. Or some investment types. And then I also help people with mortgages. I don't do mortgages myself because I'm not licensed. And my license with mutual funds restricts me from having a lot of other licenses.
Right.
But, I always have a group of professionals that I work with that do mortgages, whether it's at, some of the big banks. I have some mortgage brokers I work with. So I'm just always trying to make sure my client is taken care of, whether it's an individual or a business.
Right.
And then on the business side, there's different needs that they have, right? Because they have to think about things like, more in-depth estate planning, because they might have larger assets to pass on to their children.
Right.
And it gets more complicated when you're kind of bridging the corporations and an individual, right? Because they're still individuals at the end of the day, but the corporation is almost viewed as a separate person.
Right. It's a different entity.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So it has its own needs, right? And you have to take care of that. So on the corporate side, it's, again, doing the same kind of thing, understanding the business owner and how their corporation fits in. But then I also do things like employee benefits, employee retirement services like pensions, helping set that up for business owners. But generally speaking, those kind of fit into the personal financial planning as well.
Right. So you meet a client, right? So it's just a scenario for you. You meet a client and say they're an individual, right? And they want to get their finances back in track. So as you mentioned already, the first goal was to create a goal. Sorry,
the first goal is to create a goal.
First plan is to create a goal, right?
Yeah.
And then after that, you break down their finances, you help them out, and then you show them what you can do for future proceedings. Mm-hmm. When do you know when somebody, like, their finances aren't? Is there ever a situation where their finances are never good for there to be a decent plan that can help them?
Well, that's a tough question. I would say it's almost never too late to kind of at least start putting your finances in the right direction. But there are absolutely times where I meet someone and there's almost nothing I can do for them except say, hey, like, save more money or stop spending less. Because right. Sometimes you have to start from a tough position. I've had some very tough conversations where, tears were shed, right? But people saying, hey, I want to buy a house in 2 years, or I want to retire in 3. And I go, you're nowhere near that. Right. And sometimes I have to break that tough news. But even then I still kind of tell those people, okay, like, this is where you should start, right? Whether it's just at least building up a little bit of savings, because some people don't, right? I've had people say, I want to retire in 3 years. Well, how much money do you have saved? Nothing. And I go, I can't really help.
It's a bit hard, right?
It's a bit hard. It's a bit hard to do that, right? It's a tough situation to be in. But from there, I kind of shed light. So even, having a meeting with them, I hope at least that it sheds light on, oh, like, I'm not at all where I thought I need to be, or it's not as easy as I thought it would be. So even those people are still learning, and they can still make changes in their life, right? And from there, you can kind of make small changes, and hopefully they can come back and say, hey, I've made these changes. Where can I go from here? And I'll still try to help them where I can. And
that all has to come with the plan that you help set them up with. Right?
Exactly. And every single client, the important thing for me to do is to at least, create a plan. So everything I mentioned, figuring out your goals, figuring out where you are. So, on top of learning goals, I'm learning, like, everything about you. I'm learning about you as a person. What are your emotions like? What are your spending habits? What do you like to do to be you? Do you like playing sports? Do you like going to restaurants? It gives me an idea of what is important to you in life.
Right.
But then the end goal for everything is to, again, create a plan, right? That's my job at the end of the day, create a plan to help, hit every single one of these goals if they're possible. And if they're not possible, I will tell you.
Yeah.
And adjust it in whatever way we need to make it happen.
Right. So, because sometimes it's not going to be how the client imagines, right? When reality hits, it hits hard. And for some people
in those situations.
Exactly.
But there's definitely, there's other areas where people don't even realize what they can do. So for example, I just had a meeting a few days ago where I met with a business owner, in my area, and he's doing great for himself. Right. And he's just kind of, chugging along, helping his business grow. And that's what a lot of business owners do. They're obsessed with their business, right. As even I am obsessed with my business, and you should be.
Right.
But then, you might have a bunch of equity in your house, millions of dollars or a couple $100,000, whatever it is. These are all things that you might not realize you have access to, and you can use that to kind of help create a snowball effect and use it to buy other assets.
Right.
And when I bring this up to people, they go, oh, like, I didn't realize I can do that. I can do that. Yeah, absolutely. And you can, create other assets, create other cash flowing, businesses that are running on the side. And the whole point is that you want to build up as much as you can. Right. Obviously within reason, assuming you want to go into that area.
Right. Yeah.
Right. But kind of increasing steadily and taking advantage of everything you have access to. And some people realize, after I talk to them, they realize there's a lot more than they thought they had. And they're doing a lot better than they thought they were.
Right. And even when it comes to certain things like filing taxes, for example, right? I know that's a different field.
That's no fun.
Yeah.
I just did mine.
Yeah.
I just did mine. I'm not too happy.
I did mine. I didn't get anything back, right? Because I made a certain amount and then they taxed that amount, right? So, but what
problem to have.
Yeah, what I learned about is that so if you do specific things like an RRSP, right?
Absolutely.
Or things like donations, those all get deducted from your annual income. Yeah. So, what are some tips and tricks you can help people who are struggling when they file their taxes, they realize they're not getting any returns whatsoever? Yeah. What are tips and tricks that you do personally that you offer to your clients that could help them out?
Also, the first thing is speak to an accountant.
Yeah.
Number one. I know a lot of people who file their taxes on their own, to save 50 or $100. And again, everyone's different. I view 50 or $100 as a very worthwhile spend,
right? To
get an accountant, to get professional advice. They'll know more about taxes than I ever will. Not to say I'm not educated on that. I'm educated quite a bit.
Right. But you specialize in a certain field.
Exactly. Right? Exactly. It's different everyday activities. That's a very big starting point. RRSPs, right? That's a huge one. Just because essentially if you put, let's say you made 50,000, right? In a year. Right. And you put 5 and you've already paid tax on that 50,000. You're having, let's say a couple hundred off your paycheck every single time you get paid, which sucks.
Yeah.
Right. You put 5,000 in your RSP. Well, at tax time, you didn't make $50,000. You made $45,000.
Right.
But you already paid tax on that other 5. And so now you're getting it back at whatever your tax bracket is. Right. So let's say your tax bracket is 20%. Right. And you put 5,000 away and you were taxed on that. Well, you're getting 20% of that 5,000 back, which is essentially going to be $1,000. That's a good thing to get. And then that's $1,000 that you can now invest. Again, you could just put it back in RSP or TFSA. And it's a very quick way to kind of build up extra funds to save for a house. It's one of the basic things I tell people our age is that, open an RSP, open a TFSA. That's the basic starting point.
Right.
Donations are great, but I would say, like, if donating is big to you, do so. I believe in donating as well, wherever possible. Some people can't always afford to.
Yeah.
But from just a financial perspective, what you get on taxes, you're getting a certain amount of tax back, but it's not like you're getting all of it back.
That's true.
Right? If you donate $1,000, it's not like you get 1,000 back on tax. You might get, let's say, 200 back in taxes, which just means you threw away $800.
Yeah.
Right. You donated it. Yes, that's a great thing. But, from just the numbers standpoint, it wasn't like it helped you at all.
Yeah.
Right. Compared to like an RSP.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the biggest things that a lot of people our age group don't really know or don't really care to know about is RRSPs it's very important when it comes to the amount of money that you can save.
Absolutely.
What you can gain off of it, because you're not taxed until you take it out, right?
I think that's just a great spot to start from for most people. It's not the be all end all, but it's a very basic starting point where if you have no savings, you just have a regular savings account, an RSP can just give you some additional benefits for investing on top of a TFSA. Those are kind of the two main ones.
Right.
Right. And then there's the new tax-free, essentially first-time homebuyers account, right? And it's essentially almost a combination of a TFSA and RSP, just to help us young people save more for a house without worrying about the consequences of the taxes,
right? And
helping us invest. And the important thing is in those accounts, always invest,
right? So changing the topic a little, right? So we were talking about evading taxes. No, I'm joking.
Illegally.
Completely. So taxes is one thing, right? And and that's something that a lot of people are trying to wrap their heads around. But another big thing, and that's something I don't know if you personally deal with this, is credit, right? Credit is huge.
It's very, 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 very
probably the biggest thing that you need to have in order to progress, right? So what advice do you give to improve credit rating? And if somebody has low credit, what are steps that you like to take?
No. So that's a great question. And it's one thing is it's hard to understand all the specific rules, right? You can even ask an expert and they will say, oh, it's like, I don't know all the rules around credit because like nobody does.
Yeah, right.
It's kind of like playing a game of roulette. But, the most important thing is obviously having credit, whether it's, let's say, $1,000 credit card limit, right? Using it wisely and paying it off. Obviously start there. If you have, let's say a $700 balance on your $1,000 limit card and you just leave it and don't pay it, or you're just paying the minimum, that's not going to be great for your credit.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, let's start with some basic things, right? The first tip is you should always have less than 35% of your credit limit total with a balance. So for example, if I have an $1,000 limit, I should have a balance of $350 or less.
Okay.
Ideally, you want to pay it off every single month. But if you're going over that 35%, lenders look at it like, oh, like you don't have money, or you're irresponsible, or you don't have the money to fund your lifestyle. You're living above your means.
Mm-hmm.
That looks bad on credit.
That does.
So that's like, I would say one of the most important things, right? Aside from obviously paying your bills on time. So don't be applying for too much credit, right? Don't be applying for credit cards everywhere. That looks bad on your credit, right? Because they look at it again as this guy's applying for a lot of credit. He must not have money, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or he must be irresponsible with his spending, or whatever the case is, right? Whatever their thought process is, no one really knows, but it doesn't look great on a credit score, right? So, I would say every time you're offered a free limit increase, for example, assuming you're responsible, again, this all starts with being responsible with your money. If you have a $1,000 limit, don't max it out. If you can't pay it off at the end of the month, I would say don't spend it, because that means you're spending money you don't have. Barring an emergency, maybe, right? That's the one exception I would make.
Right.
So, let's say you have an $1,000 limit, and the Bank of Montreal comes and says, hey, we'll give you another $1,000 limit for free. That means they're not checking your credit. It won't hurt your credit. That's actually great, because that means, let's say you spend the same amount of money, let's say that $350 on your $1,000 limit I just said.
Right.
Well, now instead of, that 35, percent limit, you're now doing half that, only because your limit increased. You're spending the same exact amount of money.
Interesting.
Right.
Right.
But the ratio compared to what your whole total credit limit is among all the banks, among all your cards, is less. So you want to have less than 35% on each card and in total. So I would say that's a pretty important point to start,
right,
on increasing your credit. Again, make sure you pay everything off. If, like, for example, let's say you're going on a vacation, right? I want to go to Bahamas, or I want to go wherever I want to go. It's going to cost $2,000.
Exactly.
If you don't have the money to pay for that trip,
don't do it.
You probably shouldn't be going on that trip. And that's a harsh thing, to say, but sometimes that's kind of what finances is. It's a harsh world.
It's a harsh
right?
world. It's reality.
Exactly. It's reality. If you don't have the $2,000 for that vacation, don't go on that vacation.
Exactly.
Right? You're living above your means, as again, harsh thing to say. But you can kind of slowly elevate and get to that point.
Right.
Like I would say for myself, I don't take a lot of vacations, right? Because I kind of view it as, if I save now, right? When I'm, 50, I can go on vacation whenever I want. I don't have to worry about, when am I buying the ticket? What's the price? I can just be like, I want to go here. Done.
Right.
Right. That's kind of like way off topic on the credit thing.
No, of course. I mean, you introduce that comfortable lifestyle, right? You improve your finances, you get your credit rating good, and you don't have to worry about simple, like, small things to enjoy life. That's what it's all about. That's what you offer to your clients, right? And that's the biggest sense of relief anybody can have. It's financial freedom. Exactly.
Enjoying life is the most important thing, right? Whatever that is to you, right? Like, meeting with a lot of clients, they say, I want to travel all the time in retirement. Well, it's going to cost a lot of money, so we got to make sure you have enough. Some other people say, I don't care. Like, my dad is a perfect example. I don't even think he's left the province. Like, he does not travel, but he has a property, back where he grew up, a cottage that's his vacation. He'll go there for a month and he's happy, and it costs him, essentially nothing.
The small things that matter.
Exactly. That's what makes him happy. So everyone's different, and that's what your finances are really about, right? It's about obviously being happy and being able to enjoy life.
Right.
It's not just about building up money for the sake of building up money.
That is true.
Right.
And that's one of the hardest things a lot of people struggle with, especially, as I said, I'll say it again, people our age group, unless we went to school for it or we studied it intensely like you have, we don't have a general idea of what we're talking about. No. I've just recently started to get into my finances, and there's so much information. Originally, I took a course in Primerica, right? Or something like that.
Ooh, that's a fun topic.
Yeah. And I learned
it's a fun topic.
I learned
a little into that.
I learned a little bit about mutual funds, segregated funds, and all those types of different things. I didn't really do good in it because I didn't understand a lot of the material that was coming at me, right?
Yeah.
So what is a good starter point to get into all of that?
Are we talking specifically like mutual funds and psych funds, or getting into that, or just in general?
We'll say, what in your opinion, what do you think is the first thing we should get into, other than as we said, we talk about RRSPs, right? That's one of the most basic things.
Yeah. So the basic point to start. I mean, RRSPs and TFSAs, that's just about, starting to save money.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people, don't save money every month. I guess I should kind of back it up, where the first thing you want to do when it comes to saving money is, something that we call in the industry, pay yourself first. All that means is that, a lot of people, they say, okay, I'm making, let's say $5,000 a month or whatever the amount is. It doesn't really matter what the amount is. Point is, you're making this much amount of money. And they say, okay, well, I'll see what I have at the end of the month to save. That's the wrong way to go about it, because what are you going to do? You're going to spend all your money, right? If at the start of the month, if you're making $5,000 a month, you say, I'm putting $500 away. Doesn't matter. Obviously, you'll make sure you have enough money for your rent and your bills, food, right, and all that, right? But a lot of people say, I'll save what's left over. No, what you have to look at is pay yourself first. Instead of paying the entertainment companies and the movies and all that, you put the money in your own account.
Right.
You save yourself first. You're saving $500 a month, and then I'll spend what's left over. Or I'm saving $1,000 a month, then I'll spend what's left over, not the other way around.
Right.
And then that's how you get really strict around saving. And generally speaking, like a lot of things in life, once you start just changing one small habit, you start to almost, take those habits into other parts of your life, where you're like, oh, like, I'm saving this much money. Maybe I could save more. Or you start becoming more conscious about other things. When it comes to learning finances, I would say you could literally Google, where should I start?
Yeah.
With building my own financial planning. If you're not willing to go to an advisor or trust someone like myself,
which I'd highly recommend.
Yeah, I would as well, but I'm a little biased. But that's kind of where I would start, honestly, talking to a professional.
Right.
It could be your bank. Not that I'm the biggest fan of banks. Obviously, they're a competitor of mine.
Yeah.
So again, bias there for me. But I would say you want to start talking to, talk to professionals.
Right.
Talk to your friends who are in a good place financially. I would say a big problem in Toronto, in Canada, in North America, probably in most places around the world. I'm only exposed to North America, but in most places around the world, finance is a taboo topic. Right? I ask you, how much do you make? You're like, why are you asking? That's none of your business. How much do you have in your account? Why are you asking? That's none of your business. Right? Imagine if we just talked about this stuff openly, to obviously, some sense of privacy.
Right.
People would learn a lot more.
A lot more.
It's a huge problem. And it's a funny thing that TD, again, competitor, I'm not a big fan, but they did a good commercial recently where they have like, for example, a son asking, Dad, what's your plan for my RESP? And like, he says something, I forget what he says, but he's like, oh, like the dog has to pee or something. He just says something completely unrelated, stupid.
Right.
The point being that, like, I don't want to talk about money. Right. And the whole commercial is people asking questions about finance and then their friend changing the topic completely. So like, also surrounding yourself with people that want to take finance seriously. I'm a big believer in that you are who you hang around with. I've been very specific about trying to cut people out of my life that I don't think are beneficial.
Of course.
As I think everyone should.
Everyone.
Right. But like, have friends that you can talk to, right? Like, for example, Stefan, great friend of mine. I know we can talk about money, or we can talk about goals, or we can talk about, career, life. Having friends like that is incredibly important, because then you can kind of learn what they know, right? And there's things that he would know that I don't even know, right, even being a financial advisor myself, right? Or he might have access to or have knowledge in some field that I've just never bothered to look into.
Exactly.
Right. And vice versa. Obviously, me being in my field, I might know a bit more. But when it comes to any topic, have friends that are knowledgeable in that area, but especially with finance, you want to surround yourself with good people, advisors, people that are doing well. You want to be around those people, right? You do always want to try to be the dumbest person in the room.
Exactly.
Right. It's a very cliche statement, but it rings true in a lot of areas of life. And finance is one of them.
Yeah, a big thing too, because if you're not the smartest, there's always room for growth. Doesn't matter which field you're in or how long you've been studying something, always room for growth. Like as a mechanic, for example, doesn't matter if you got 40, 50 years in the industry. Now we have a fully electric cars, right? Oh,
that must be a headache.
It's not as much. It's a lot more electrical diagnostics, but it's not that much.
Yeah.
But anyways, now that we got through all the fun stuff, right? I want to get to some of the funner stuff.
Okay. What's the funner stuff?
Well, I want to know your thoughts on crypto.
Oh, yeah. Crypto's fun.
Because crypto is always the bread and butter, right? We have various different coins and we have this whole fundamental system that wants to implement itself into the financial world permanently, right? So replacing the dollar value, for example.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on crypto? What do you think crypto has to offer, and the positives and negatives of crypto?
So I would first say, like, I mean, one, there is no licensed body to talk about crypto,
Right.
Which is part of the problem. But I'm not licensed to talk about that. So we'll start there with anything I say is just an opinion.
Of course,
right?
everything's here's opinion.
I wouldn't call myself an expert in crypto, but obviously I've done my fair share of research because clients ask about it all the time. So I guess the first thought is that the thought behind it is good, like the technology in terms of trying to, get away from too much oversight. I think some oversight is good. And I don't think you want to be on either side of the spectrum where, let's say, the government controls everything or they control nothing, like in the space of crypto. I think that's a big problem for it right now. I think it's in its infancy, right? I do think there's a lot of areas that will grow, and different coins obviously have different benefits. Ethereum has, better, contract-based options than, let's say, Bitcoin does. It does, yeah. Right? Which is why Ethereum is used more for business, as an example, when it is used in business, which is still, it's growing, but still, albeit rare. I would say just right now, right? Because the future is hard to predict with crypto. I do think it might go up, right? It could also just, disappear. It wouldn't be the first time that new things have just completely kind of erased out of nowhere. Not that I think that will happen. I would say it's very risky right now, right? So if you told me, I'm putting all my savings into Bitcoin, I would tell you that's probably a very, very, very risky and bad idea. Right. You might become, a millionaire, right, overnight, or you might become broke overnight.
Exactly.
Right. That's a problem.
That is
a
big problem.
So I would say, like, number one, with anything in the financial world, I'm a big believer in diversification, as anyone in the space who's worth their salt should say. Right. Don't put all your money into mutual funds, right? Just because I sell mutual funds or set up mutual funds for clients doesn't mean I should recommend put all your money in it. That's a bad idea. Same thing with Bitcoin. Don't bet your life savings on Bitcoin. It's a very easy way to lose everything, right? On top of that, obviously, there's all the ethical questions about Bitcoin. But like we were talking a little bit about before, my take on the biggest issue for it, or the biggest hurdle I see right now, is governmental control, right? Because governments control currency, and for example, like with inflation and everything going on, the government, and the Bank of Canada and the institutions in place, they are doing a good job at bringing inflation down.
Right.
So if Bitcoin replaced everything, as an example, and the government can control it, how are we going to bring inflation down?
Exactly.
It'd be very, very, very difficult. It might happen, but we've never experienced that before, right? And again, this is a first in history. This kind of thing is happening, so we just don't know, right? But I would say that's a big problem, right? And another thing is tax, right? We all hate tax. I hate tax. You hate tax. We all do. At the same time, I've separated my shoulder before, and I've had my appendix taken out and my tonsils taken out, and I've had health issues, and I'm only 25, right? How much would I be in debt if that were to happen?
Exactly.
Luckily for myself, and you can say whatever you want about our healthcare system, I'm not in debt because I live here and I pay taxes and my healthcare was covered, right? And taxes cover a lot of things we do in life. Education is another example. Everyone says, "Oh, my degree, $10,000, it's so expensive," and it is. I think it should be more affordable, but that's already partially subsidized by our taxes, by our government. That is true, yeah. Right? It could be a $20,000 or $30,000 bill, right? If it wasn't for our taxes, like in the States, right? So taxes are an important part of a society. You don't want to live somewhere that there's no taxes, right? It's not the best thing in the world.
It's a bit chaotic.
And you don't want to live somewhere where there's too much. It's kind of finding a happy medium. So that's a big problem. And I think the government obviously is going to have to step in and regulate it.
Yeah.
And I do think regulation is important, right? My industry, finances in general, are very, very heavily regulated. If we look back not even that far, in 2008 with the housing crisis that happened and essentially everything that was going on in Wall Street, that was because it wasn't as heavily regulated then. Right. And a lot of regulations that, especially in Canada, now help prevent us from all these things that happen, around the world. Another example, just a few weeks ago, the banks collapsing in America.
Yeah.
Credit Suisse in Switzerland, which is a gigantic bank.
A huge one, yeah.
Right. These things happen because the regulation is not as strong, especially in the States when it comes to banking. So these banks can collapse, and obviously you can lose a lot of money. In Canada, it's much more heavily regulated. An example is that deposits in Canada are guaranteed up to a certain percent.
Right.
In the States, that's not a thing. right? If you put in $100,000 and that bank goes under, $100,000 gone.
It's gone. Yeah.
Right. That doesn't happen in Canada. Right.
Exactly.
So if everything kind of went to crypto, well, how do you regulate it?
That is
right.
true.
So regulation is a very important thing with anything that is going to become a big part of life. AI, another example.
Yeah.
There's no regulation right now. Things could go very, very wrong, very, very quickly.
Yeah.
That's like a whole nother topic off finance. But regulation is a big part of it. I think governments might be forced to kind of let crypto in eventually, or they could go the way they are going right now and just banning it outright. And that makes buying things with your money very hard.
Very hard.
Right.
Yeah.
I put my life savings into to get a house with crypto. And now the government bans it. I can't buy that house now.
Exactly.
Or, I pull that money out and now that's essentially like unclean cash or illegal cash. Right. That now becomes very hard, if not impossible, to buy a house a conventional way going through a bank. Let's say the legal way.
Yeah.
Right. It can become very, very difficult when governments start stepping in and regulating it potentially too heavily.
Right.
So again, why I would say don't put your life savings. Don't bet everything on it. At the same time, like it's okay to have fun.
It is.
Put money in that you're okay with losing, and you shouldn't be okay losing too much money. I don't think anybody should.
I don't think anybody's okay with losing money.
You'd be surprised.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised.
Unless you have a lot of it already. I don't know.
I agree. I see Drake betting like millions of dollars
on stake and all that.
He wins some of them, but like I would never be okay betting that. No. Right. I guess, bet with what you're okay losing. It's the same thing with crypto or any investment really. But again, just focusing on crypto, I think there's more regulation to come before it becomes a safer platform, because it just goes back to the beginning of what I was saying. It's just not safe right now. Right. And that's the real big problem.
Right. Yeah. And crypto is a loose cannon. And I think
that's a good word for it.
Yeah. And I think going forward, there's different things I've been hearing about. If you ever heard of XRP or Ripple,
absolutely.
They want to turn that into an international currency in which you can send money overseas almost instantaneously, right?
Yeah.
And they're going through some class action lawsuit. And if that wins, XRP is worth like from right now, it's I think it's at less than 64 cents. It's going to go shoot to like 40, 50 bucks. But that's another story.
For people who own XRP, that'd be great.
Yeah, me.
Yeah.
So I guess we're wrapping up in that time. I just want one piece of information to give to the viewers, to give to those who want to get better at their finances but can't. But what is something just short, sweet, and simple that you can offer to them?
The number one thing is just figuring out where you want to go and then getting you on track to there.
Right.
So like I would say, call me, I'll be your guy. And just figuring out where to start. That's the most important thing, starting with anything in life, whether it's working out, eating right, sleeping enough, breaking habits, whatever it is. Same thing with finance. You just have to start somewhere. Right. So, give me a call, or if you don't like me or my face for whatever reason, call someone you trust. That's an advisor, and just start. Right. Starting is the most important thing.
Right. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. So, Brandon, we'd like to thank you again for coming on our podcast, for educating us and our viewers on finances, because as I said, not a lot of us know what the nitty pickies and the gritties are with finances. It's very hard to disascertain certain things from it. So guys, remember, you can check out Brandon if you need financial help. It's Brendan Bawn Financial on Instagram and all his socials. And on his website is brendenbawn.com, right? Financial.com.
I think brendenbawnfinancial.com.
Yeah, there we
Some
go.
of those things will be changing. I'm kind of going through a rebrand and changing everything to Bawn Financial Group.
Okay.
Just because I'm starting my own. I'm essentially running my own finance firm,
right?
And starting to rebrand. But for now, it's a Bawn Financial Group on Instagram, brendenbawnfinancial.com.
There we go.
And, feel free, take a look, take in any information you'd like, and give me a call with any questions.
And don't shy away. This gentleman right here is probably one of the best persons I've ever spoken with when it comes to financials. So please give him a shout out.
Thank you.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. We've had Brendan Bawn Financial on the episode with us, and we're going to have many more. And I want to thank you all for tuning in. Remember to check us on our socials. We're at The Overthinkers on almost everything, right? So that's we'll have this somewhere behind my header somewhere. But thank you again, and we'll see you for the next time.
Peace.
Peace.